YC is like the world's best startup accelerator. Typically, it funded companies like Dropbox, like Airbnb. The admission rate is incredibly low, also because like a lot of people apply. By the way, into YCombinator, we got not with our first idea, but with our second idea on the third attempt. And I think this desire to build is the most important thing that we need in entrepreneurs. You need to have this like intensity. You need to have immense agility. You need to be very resourceful. And this is maybe the most important, like you need to have extreme desire for success. Like you need to want it. Otherwise you shouldn't do it. For me, it is the prospect of building a generational company, and prospects of doing that and being at the helm of such a company is what electrifies me every day. And I hope to be doing this for the next couple of decades.
Hi everyone, my guest today is Miroslav Gasparek. He's on the Forbes 30 Under 30 Europe list, and he's the CEO and co-founder of Sensible Biotechnologies, a company backed by YCombinator and a number of leading early-stage investors, which is creating a cutting-edge platform to unlock the next generation of mRNA medicines. In this conversation, we're going to talk about how to start and scale a biotech company, how to get Y-Combinator funding, and how to build an international company from scratch. And of course, we're going to touch on this important topic of fulfillment, because it wouldn't be a Shameless Careers episode without discussing that. So, Miro, thank you so much for being here with me today.
Maria, thank you so much for inviting me. Excited for it.
So, let's start with what your company does.
So at Sensible Biotechnologies, we are building a unique technology for design, manufacturing, and scale-up of mRNA molecules so that we can enable mRNA therapeutics for diseases such as cancer, rare disease, and a number of others. And we are making this in a cost-effective and scalable way, so we can actually make these safe and effective drugs accessible to the people across the globe.
And how did you discover your passion for biotech?
Look, I'm originally from a little 400 people village in northwestern Slovakia called Nosice. So I want to give a shout out to my nursery school teacher. She always says, whenever you go somewhere, like, please mention me, mention that.
Y-Combinator knows about your nursery teacher.
That's right. I owe her a lot. She didn't force me to sleep when I was 4 years old, and she let me read books instead. So that's been helpful. Now, kind of kidding aside, I was really fascinated by how things works. That naturally brings you to physics, and ultimately, if you want to go big, that brings you to astrophysics, because you see these beautiful pictures of planets and these kids' books. So from early days, I was kind of hopelessly torn apart between theoretical astrophysics and physics and mathematics on one side, and by medicine on the other side. Because my grandma, she was in a lot of pain. She had all of these whatever diseases that come with age, and I wanted her to be relieved from that pain. So I was thinking, as I was going through my primary school and high school, I was representing Slovakia and all of these physics and astrophysics and other Olympiads, but I was also thinking about becoming a doctor. Now the problem is that if you study medicine in Slovakia, that's extremely theoretical, and I thought it's super boring. I wanted to apply mathematics and quantitative thinking in medicine. So, and I, at the same time, I thought that like being theoretical astrophysicist, it's not, it's kind of cool if you're watching Armageddon, but but otherwise it's not that practical, right? I wanted to apply quantitative principles as I used to in my thinking about physics to medicine. And that's why I decided to go and study biomedical engineering. I was very lucky to study bioengineering at Imperial College London. That was amazing school. It was the first time I would say I got like a really proper education. I got to understand what becoming a good engineer means. And from very early days, I became engaged in a research, actually in the first year of my undergrad. And throughout my undergrad, I was very privileged to do research first at Imperial College, then after second year of my undergrad at Caltech, and after the third year at Stanford with the leading figures in the field, with Reiko Tanaka at Imperial, Richard Murray at Caltech, and Drew Endy at Stanford. And Drew Endy was actually one of the fathers of this field called synthetic biology, which is really focused on rational design and construction of biological systems to help humanity, like engineering cells to make novel materials. And in Drew Endy's lab, one of his prior students was Jason Kelly. And Jason Kelly co-founded a company called Ginkgo Bioworks as he was finishing his PhD. And he did that in, I believe, in the first decade of 21st century. But Ginkgo then IPO'd at $15 billion in 2021, right? So imagine that, from PhD student to CEO of a $15 billion company in a little more than a decade or so. And that journey really fascinated me. I was already having an entrepreneurial spirit during my first year of undergrad. With a couple of friends, we built this project of a water bottle that measured how much you drink. I think that this all combined into me understanding that science is important, but that practical impact is important even to a greater extent, because I started to see that there is a lot of science, then there is a subset of great science, and out of that there is a subset of great science that can get commercialized, and out of that there is a tiny subset of great science that can get commercialized, that actually gets commercialized and helps people as new drugs, as new products, and so on. So after working with Drew, I knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur, but at the same time, I wanted to be really, technologically adept entrepreneur. So I ended up going to do a PhD at Oxford. So I came to Oxford in 2019, and I already had this, I would say, you get bitten by entrepreneurial bug, and then you have this internal fire or a fever or something that I wanted to build something. And I think like this desire to build is the most important thing, or maybe one of the most important things that we need in entrepreneurs. Just you need to have this passion for creating something big. And I had no idea how, by the way.
Looking at your entrepreneurial life right now, if someone is thinking, oh, could I be an entrepreneur? Is entrepreneurship for me? Based on your experience, could you say who is suitable for entrepreneurship and versus not?
I think what applies generally is that you need to have some kind of a drive and desire for autonomy. And if you want to run a startup, well, then you need to have a couple other things. So first of all, you need to recognize very typically that to run a startup, and especially I would say venture-backed startup. So to me, the definition of startup is like something that wants to build something very big and wants to build it fast, right? It's not like, okay, I'm going to be building this into a big company for the next 200 years, me and my son and his daughter and whatnot. So to do that, well, you need to be a little crazy at least. Like you can't. So you need to have. I call it like you need to have this like intensity. You need to have immense agility. You need to have a bit of a disregard for work-life balance, because whatever like people will tell you that like, oh, I will do this, in a comfort and so on. Maybe that's possible if you're like executive chairman, you have had like 5 exits, you have done it, you have money, you have access, and people will work for you. But that's not where most of us are starting. So you need to have immense agility. You need to be very resourceful. I think you need to be extremely receptive to feedback and be able to iterate fast. And not all people have that, right? Like you can't get offended if somebody tells you like, I'm sorry, like this is absolutely rubbish what you're thinking about. And I think, and this is maybe the most important, like you need to have extreme desire for success. Like you need to want it. Otherwise you shouldn't do it. I don't think like you should put yourself through the torture of that without just seeing that North Star, what this could be.
What does torture of entrepreneurial life look like in real practice?
So especially if you're a CEO, you just have this immense responsibility. I mean, the seriousness of everything probably like first kind of collapsed on me when I was executing the first kind of mortgage recommendation letter for one of my colleagues, and I was like, okay, so right, like if this company goes out of business, like this colleague of mine, like she will have issue repaying the mortgage. Like, oh my God, it better doesn't go out of business. But the torture is like you can't switch off. I don't think, at least in early stages, this is not 9 to 5, 5 days a week thing. This is, 6 a.m. to like midnight, 7 days a week sometimes. So you will deal with immense amount of uncertainty. So that is also something that you need to be able to cope with. You need to be able to overcome rejection. You will hear no, you're stupid, this doesn't make sense. When we were starting, we heard like a couple times like this is absolutely rubbish, like this is a joke, this can never work out. And by the way, 4 years later, you hear a pharma exec saying like, I thought that this is absolutely like ridiculous, but now I see your data. It's actually this can be the future. It's hard to be receptive to feedback, while at the same time be very convinced. So have a very high level of conviction that what you are doing is actually going to be very meaningful, and is the right thing to do. And this, you will not have work-life balance. Sometimes you will will have. You'll be working day, you will be working night, you will put a lot of effort into projects that will just completely fail. And you will have great responsibility for people. But it gives you, on the upside, I think it gives you extreme agency, it gives you extreme optionality and ability to make decisions for yourself, which I really, really like. And I think that, in the way I think of it, in our free, liberal, democratic, capitalistic society, which I think we are all having immense privilege to live in, this just gives you this amazing freedom to build. And at least for me, again, being from a post-communist country, this is not what the generation of my parents or grandparents had. So I feel extremely privileged to be able to do what I do.
What tips would you give to people in terms of resilience? Because I would imagine downs in entrepreneurship are different from downs in the corporate world, because here I bet any entrepreneur identifies themselves with success of their business, and if something is going wrong and you feel like you're not going to succeed or there is a risk of not succeeding, it must feel really personal, it must feel like a lot is at stake. How do you deal with this level of pressure?
I will say that the first thing is that it generally helps to be the kind of person that can really well control emotions. Like I think it's extremely hard if you get extremely emotional, like, and maybe like somebody meditates, somebody goes to gym. It's genuinely like a first, like, as a person's characteristics, a very helpful thing. Like you just need to learn to be a bit detached. Although we're extremely attached, but you need to learn to be like, okay, like first of all, like this company is not me. Like if this fails, unless it fails because I bought like a home in Caribbean and 5 Porsches, that it doesn't reflect necessarily on me being a bad person, right? So that's, I think, the first thing. The second thing is that it is liberating to accept. So it's hard because, again, it's this balance. Like, first of all, you need to believe this is not going to fail. And you need to want it not to fail, but you need to accept that it might. And it's important to understand that, like, if you fail a company, statistically, a number of founders have succeeded on the second or third or fourth attempt. It's not a shame. Actually, and people will be more prone to give you money, paradoxically, or to invest money if you have done it before, even if you failed. I have some investors who always tell to me, like, even if this fails, I have money, already set aside for your next company. And that was actually extremely liberating, that I just made this mental suggestion to myself. And I think that the third way to deal with lows is to just analyze them, take it very rationally, and take your lessons from it. And I think that it's a cliche, but people say what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And nothing like when we were starting Sensible, we went through some difficult times. We were doing hard pivot, where we were basically in hard pivoting. Biotechnology, although software-enabled biotechnology company, is something completely different. And I can wake up and open a Python script or anything and start writing again and erase it and so on. That doesn't work like that in biology. It's not like we are just going to like completely flip everything because they have IP things. You need to okay, this is a meaningful market. Is biology going to work out? All of these things. So we were starting from scratch. We were doing such a hard pivot, and it was so difficult. So I think it helps to also just have a bit of a resilience.
Yeah, it does feel like you need to almost accept that will be the constant. Problems will be everywhere, and you just need to be in the problem-solving mode.
And the bigger the company, the bigger the problems. I always, I thought when we were just me and my co-founder, oh my God, it's such a big problem, to set up a bank account in the US or set up a payroll. And then you raise your couple million pre-seed, and then you're 10 people, and okay, then suddenly it's not your co-founder who has to do all the science or is in the lab, but oh wow, now you need to actually manage people. You need to start doing hierarchy now, and then you're 26 people like us, and okay, you don't even know about payroll anymore. You don't see invoices. Somebody gets that done. Somebody ideally helps you with your schedule. You hopefully by the time have actually a team that helps you operate, so you're not bogged down. But the problems get bigger, and I can't imagine, right? If you're a 500 people public company, right? That's a big difference. So I think that it just evolves. The problems change; they never disappear.
So going back to your journey, could you describe how did you come up with the business idea? Because again, a lot of people who want to be entrepreneurs, they struggle to find it.
Totally. So we were, as I've said, we were doing a hard pivot. So by the way, into YCombinator, we got not with our first idea, but with our second idea on the third attempt. So that's important. You will fail and you have to persevere. It's okay to fail. And then there was a global pandemic. I worked with the Slovak Ministry of Health on COVID-19's dynamics modeling, and that brought me closer to biosecurity. And I worked a bit with Megan Palmer at Stanford on biosecurity of engineered microbes, and ultimately ended up advising board member of WHO on biosafety. And it turns out that if you're from a little country where few people do what you do, you can do a lot of crazy things as a 25 years old. So that was cool, scary, but cool. And that brought us closer to thinking about mRNA. And we saw, right, the mRNA saved humanity during the COVID-19 pandemics. mRNA vaccines developed at an astonishing speed, saved millions of lives, tens of billions of dollars in economic volume that the lockdowns brought. But we started to see very clearly two things. First of all, the mRNA technology as it was had its clear shortcomings, both in terms of the supply chain and costs and kind of quantities, but also in terms of quality. And we fundamentally started thinking, okay, this sounds like an interesting thesis, mRNA quality and mRNA quantity and supply chain. Is there an opportunity to change what are the dogmas of mRNA? And it turned out that many dogmas have been played around, but one wasn't, which was the way mRNA is made. And it's all made synthetically. It's made cell-free using a number of different chemical components. Well, and at Sensible we thought, why don't we do something radically different? Why don't we engineer living cells, like those that you use to make beer, right, or bread, to make mRNA, reprogram it to make the mRNA of interest. And obviously it's more complex, but because your cells or my cells are making thousands of mRNA molecules every second. So could we make mRNA in the living cells this way and make it with a superior quality in superior quantities, so it will clear the bar that is necessarily needed to make mRNA therapies, and make this safely, make this with a great efficacy, and actually so that it's accessible to people, so with a supply chain that will not be constrained by complex and expensive raw materials. So I described our story, but I wanted to point out a couple of general points. So I think that especially if you want to build venture-backed startup, you need to pick up a problem that is venture-backable. So it has to be a huge problem with a huge market. It's if your estimate is that your market is going to be $100 million, if everything goes well, that's not going to fly. If this is where it's kind of easy in biology, because if you bring, say, a first-in-class drug for a disease that is reasonably prevalent, well, that's going to be billions or tens of billions or hundreds of billions of dollars of a market value that you're unlocking. And if you have a platform company like us, so we could work with a couple pharmas on some diseases and a couple diseases on our own, building mRNA therapeutics for those. Well, you can easily imagine that this adds, and suddenly, you realize when you do your bottom-up calculation that you're addressing $400 billion market value, right? And now the investors will think in this way, the venture investors. Look, what's the chance that these guys will actually, succeed? It's 5% chance. So there needs to be ability to construct a portfolio such that if I invest in 20 companies and there's a 5% chance of a success of one of them, well, that needs to return all of my funds. So you need to pick a big problem so that even if there is a small chance of you succeeding, that everybody assumes that there is a very small chance, this can be a real big thing. So I think the problem selection is extremely important. Pick a big problem. I think that the second important thing is to pick a problem where you have a great fit to solve, right? I probably wouldn't be a great founder of a crypto startup right now because I know very little about cryptocurrencies, right? Genuinely, I know very little. I probably wouldn't be a great founder of some kind of a SaaS startup because, I know very little. But so pick something where you can build a credible story where if somebody asks you oh, why you? Why nobody else has done it? There needs to be a unique answer to that. There is the third thing you need to have a passion for the problem. So I'm purposefully speaking about so pick up a big problem. Pick a problem where you can credibly contribute, and ideally, you must be passionate about it because there will be exactly those tough times, and then you need to be driven by your passion for that problem. It's easy to get this kind of feeling that it's all about hanging out in a cool parties with cool investors, being at a Forbes 30 under 30 summit in Kenya or whatnot, and getting pat on your shoulder and oh, you're such a great entrepreneur, you're whatever, insert the name of the country's Elon Musk or something. But that's a little rays of sunlight rather than the things that people don't see, which is hey, I had to fire this person because turned out to be a terrible hire. Oh, we are behind on this. That thing is running out of money. That just said, we are not good enough. That scientific advisor said, they're actually not going to work with me. All of these things are things that we are not typically open to share. And I think there is the positive selection bias around all of these things.
And let's go back to the stage where you have joined YCombinator. Mm-hmm. How did you do it? What do you think made your application successful? And what type of people generally got selected by YCombinator based on what you have observed? What type of ideas? What type of profiles?
I think it's changing, so it evolves. But what got us into YC was the persistence, first and foremost. I mean, we applied on a third time. We iterated on a feedback we got. By the way, the idea we applied with, which was engineered bacterial therapeutics for the respiratory tract, we didn't end up working on for both non-technical and technical reasons. I think, by the way, it was a pretty bad idea, and I give a huge credit to Jared Friedman of YCombinator, the partner who worked with us. He gave us 20 reasons why this is not a good idea, but then he funded us to do. The YC funded us to do something else, and that was really incredible, and I will always be grateful to Jared and Jeff Ralston, who was the president of YC, and others. But I think what made us stand out is okay. So YC is the world's best startup accelerator. Typically, it it funded companies like Dropbox, like Airbnb, Ginkgo Bioworks, Sensible, but a number of other great companies, and they have a standard application that you have to fill. I think that first and foremost, the as I'm learning in my career, actually, one of the most important things is clarity of thought. So, no rubbish, no, like sometimes you can see like when somebody like says like, oh, ChatGPT, please can you like draft this for me? It just gets like, it's a lot of fluff. But clarity of thought, state what problem you're solving, how you're solving it, why is the best solution, why this is going to be a great market, why this is a great company, why they should view, why you are a great team. And in our case, when YC invests in science startups, it's not just like that, you could say, hippie happy application. There is, more to it.
What's the share of
It's
startups there?
yeah. I think like if you're like building a deep tech or like science or life science startup, they will ask you for papers, for like data and whatnot. They did a reference calls with some of our advisors at the time, right? For example. So
sorry, a moment. Like, what type of businesses do they typically fund?
they have funded everything from, I think like it's Boom. They're building a supersonic aircraft to, Dropbox or I don't know, Airbnb. That's like quite different. That's like a website, right? So a number of biotech companies, now more of a defense companies, now they are funding a lot of AI-enabled businesses. I think that's a big theme, by the way. But understandably, I think we need more funding for AI. But yeah, look, the admission rate is incredibly low. Also because like a lot of people apply. Because YCombinator, I think it's like a PhD in startups. Like it can't help you. It doesn't build successful company for you. I think it gives you incredible baseline in thinking about how not to make like those stupid mistakes that can easily kill your company. Because in early stage, like any really stupid mistake, I mean, procedural, administrative, can make you non-fundable, for example. So I think this is what YC helps to remove as an issue. So it's a great program. We owe a lot. Marian and I owe a lot to YC. They've been amazing.
And can you tell me what are these stupid mistakes that people can make at the start of the company?
If you're a US taxpayer, like you don't file your 83B election within 30 days of incorporating your company, and as I understand it, like suddenly you might be paying, I don't know, like 30% of like any kind of exit tax. I mean, please, like, nobody, accountants, lawyers, don't quote me on this, but I know like this is a big deal. Or you don't buy your shares, like. You don't pay like whatever $50 the first time like for shares, and suddenly like, oh my god, I like investor is doing a diligence. The basic things, right? Like how to tell your story. Like people, like when I look at the decks and I see a number of decks, because I'm basically a venture partner for one of our investors, Zaka Ventures, and looking at their life science deals. And so I see a lot of decks, and sometimes you open it and you went through like 30 slides and you're like, I have no idea what these people are doing, right? And this is, if you went through YCombinator, I can guarantee you that like you will have like 10 slide deck and like people understand what you're doing. It's so important. And there's like a lot of amazing like back office support, a lot of information. Like there is literally like the internal, you could say, engine, that internal like forum and internal resources that you can't share outside of YC, right? That is incredibly helpful on many fronts. So again, like Paul Graham, Sam Altman, Jared, Jeff, Gary Tan, they deserve amazing credit for building YC into what it is and for doing what they have done for the community.
And what else would you recommend to people who would like to have a chance to be accepted to YC? So you've mentioned clarity of thought, ability to communicate your story, what business you're building, what problem you're trying to solve. Anything else? Big problem that you're solving. Yeah. Anything else that you would recommend to people?
So if you get through the application stage, you will go to interview stage, and we will have like a 10-minute interview with a couple of YC partners. I actually be practiced quite a bit, like be able to communicate all of these things well. I think that matters a lot. yeah, this is quite important. I think that, look, those partners, right? They have seen thousands of companies, so they probably have like reasonably, and everybody makes mistakes. I mean, I'm sure they've missed on some of the great companies, but what I'm trying to say, like, they have seen, like there's a lot of things they haven't. There's very few things that they haven't seen. Don't be on autopilot. Like, get feedback, question things, question your mantras. I very often tell my team, like, I was talking to two of my research scientists, and I told them, guys, here is a slide deck I prepared, an internal slide deck around certain strategic decision. So your job is basically now to go and like prove me wrong, or like show me that I might be wrong. I need to be extremely open-minded because it's a big strategic decision. So I think like that ability to hear you are wrong for reasonable things, and like, you're ugly and I don't like you and this is why you are wrong, but more like, hey, look, you're wrong because my market for ABC thing is not big enough, or like there is 20 other people trying to do this. Why do you think you're the 21st one trying that is going to be the successful one?
So basically, stress test your ideas.
Stress test your ideas,
possible,
right?
Yeah.
Yes, stress test your ideas. Think about it like from a variety of things, a variety of angles. I think like what is also important, what YC loves, is resourcefulness, right? Like figure out unique ways to do things. The big advantage of startups is the agency. You can move fast. You can change things. Fortunately, in a small company, it's like, like that technology, that's important. We need it. So I'm going to go and I'm going to talk to like 20 people and license it in, the best one. And I will be going on calls. I will be sitting there. I will be smiling, and I can actually be the person who can make the decisions in the room.
Can you tell me what type of people you were surrounded by at Y-Combinator? What type of profiles have you seen? Are they all straight out of university?
No.
Are they all young in the stage of pre-family? Because people say, well, once you have family, it's harder to take risks. Just describe me a typical profile, and also professionally. Do they all come from, the backgrounds of like this business that they're building? Or did some of them jump on completely different problems versus their background?
Yeah, it's a variety. A lot of different people came with a lot of different backgrounds. I mean, speaking of family, there is advice that YC gives to people who have kids. I mean, I don't, and I can only imagine how difficult that would be. But so they were like a husband and a wife, I think, like in a Y-Combinator, they founded a company together.
No way, with a child.
I'm not sure if they had children, but they were a pair, and there were young people, there were old people, there were like somebody who was like 68 years old as a founder. So some of these people are very experienced. I think I think like everybody can be an entrepreneur, no matter what your origin is, no matter what your religion is, no matter if you're tall, if you're short, if you're man, woman, it doesn't matter. I think like what matters is that you want to build. That's the most important thing. That the urge to create something new.
Yeah.
And one of the most important features of a good executive is like you can excite people about what you're doing, sell them the vision, sell them yourself, and get these people to be betting on you.
Let's now go into how you are scaling the company right now. Can you tell me which stage of your company you're at, and how are the challenges that you're facing different versus when you just started off?
Right, so at Sensible, we are a seed-stage company. We raised around $13 million so far in our pre-seed and seed round. We are 26 people across the US, UK, and Slovakia. We have already kind of closed several strategic partnerships with big tech enablers like Sartorius, Ginkgo Bioworks, research collaboration with NVIDIA, and now we are talking to a number of big pharmas about basically collaborating together on co-developing mRNA medicines, where we would design, optimize, and make mRNA for them, and they would basically do the preclinical development and a clinical development, and we would then basically get some upfront payments, success milestones, and then like ultimately, if the drugs get approved, you would get a portion of the net sales, which is that's what is attractive about all of these deals, right? Because if the likelihood of success is not too high, but imagine that your technology leads to a new drug being approved, and that drug, so just to give you an idea, the best-selling drug in the world, Keytruda by Merck, pembrolizumab, that generates around $30 billion a year in revenue, right? That's slightly less than half of all Merck's revenues from one drug, and is like a $200 billion pharma company. So imagine that you would be getting like 10% of net sales every year. So you're getting $3 billion a year, right? That's pretty okay. And you don't need to do anything until the patent expiration on that drug. So that's something, one area we're focusing on. The other areas, we are still like developing our platform, building up our capability to design and make better mRNA, to engineer the cells to make better RNA, as well as a scale up of actual technology. It's one thing to make, a small amount of mRNA, like imagine the glass like this, and it's something different to make it, in 200-liter fermenter, and it's something else to make it in 2,000-liter fermenter. What we are excited about is that we are not only seeing what we are solving as a problem is not only seen as important by these big pharmas, and they are confirming, hey, currently that synthetic RNA is not that great, but even international institutions and national governments, so like NATO give us non-dilutive funding, European Union give us quite some non-dilutive funding, because they think what we are doing is strategically important for countries in terms of resilient and strong supply chain for mRNA, which will be the strategically important molecule for the future, for human health, for the security, and for economics. Because as I often, when they meet with me, the various ministers of the governments across the globe, I tell them, look, biomanufacturing is going to be incredibly important for a long time. We just outsource it. We always thought we'll make it in the US and, we will just cheaply make it in Asia. Well, that sentiment has changed. First with COVID, when we learned that in the West, I would call, broadly, let me call, the Europe and the US the West, and Australia, we just stopped making things. We will just outsource the production. And second thing, like the supply chains can get easily interrupted. We went from, during COVID, if you think about it, we went from flying all across the globe and not thinking about anything to complete lockdown, being locked down in many of us in spaces like this in a matter of weeks. And we wouldn't like us to have that again. And having the supply chains that are robust and not reliant on fragile steps is one of the important things. So right now we are building our technology further. It's the results we have are exciting. They're externally validated by now.
And tell me how the challenges of this phase of your company are different. So of the scaling phase are different versus when you started off.
You suddenly have a bigger team. You're focusing as the CEO. My work basically doesn't really involve much of any operational work. I focus on fundraising. I focus on setting objectives for my management team. And I focus on partnership conversations, right? Because it turns out, like, especially if you're a startup, like big pharmas, they are not going to talk to your associate scientists, right? They will want to talk to you. So it's not like I have a brilliant vice president of business development. She has 25 years of career at senior BD positions at Eli Lilly, which is the largest pharma company in the world right now. But, they will want to talk to you nevertheless. So you need to, especially in the life science, you need to do all of these things. You need to do yourself. And I keep the tab on our science. I look at our new data that my colleagues are generating every day. Sometimes they're scared that, like, our CSO came to them, my founder, Marian, comes to them and say, like, oh, these are some great results I have seen. They're like, oh, how did you see it? And they're like, yeah, I looked at it, it's in a raw data. And they're like, how do you know this in raw data? And I'm like, well, Miro told me. And like, oh my God, like, he's looking at this? I mean, yeah, he's looking at it every day. So it's important for you to stay in touch with everything.
So it's important.
But not micromanage. Like, I think, like, the big problem is, like, when people micromanage. frankly, I don't have time for that, but this is, I think, an important thing.
So it almost feels like the right balance of empowering people, like what you've mentioned
That's right.
around setting objectives for a management team, but at the same time getting involved, knowing the right moments and the issues that are worthwhile to get involved in.
That's right. And knowing, for example, when to almost like disrupt like the flow and come and say, hey, guys, like, I call it like almost like an intuition, in a sense that, like, so this thing right now is extremely important. Stop what you're doing, go fix that, and I will sit on it. Like, I had something like this with some of our non-dilutive funding. There was a thing we had to resolve, and I told my team, guys, like, in no uncertain terms, this is a priority, and you have to solve this by the end of the week. It's now priority for me. Anything I can do, let's do that, but it has to get solved, period, no matter what. And this is, I think, like, when you can't do this every day, because then it will be disruptive, but sometimes you have to make decisions as the CEO. I think, like, somebody said, I think it comes originally from Kira Boy, who is a partner at Khosla Ventures, one of the leading funds in the venture capital space. Like, as the CEO, you're ultimately evaluated by those 4 or 5 big decisions you do per year and getting those right.
And last question I have promised in the beginning that I will ask you is about career fulfillment. Can you tell me, based on everything you've experienced and all the entrepreneurial highs and lows that we've talked about, what's the recipe for being fulfilled in what you do?
I will keep it very brief. Work on what you care about. Work on something that empowers you and other people. And for me, it is the prospect of building a generational company, a big company that will help people save lives, make medicines safer, more effective, and accessible, and actually make the first mRNA therapeutics possible while making us all more secure. And prospects of doing that and being at the helm of such a company is what electrifies me every day, and that keeps me up at night, keeps me excited, and I hope to be doing this for the next couple of decades.